Hey, it's Antrice, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter podcast. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. And if you're a longtime listener, welcome back. Savvy Painter is the podcast for artists who want practical, tactical tips to create a meaningful art practice that is fulfilling and supports you. So today we have another roundtable episode with a few members of Growth Studio. We're going to talk about money and art. I know it's a touchy subject, but it's actually one of my favorites because it usually brings things to light, so many hidden beliefs, some that may help you, some that may be holding you back, but pulling them apart, taking a look at them is really, really helpful to move you forward in your art practice. How we think about money and its relationship to our art impacts what we do in our studio. It impacts our ability to create. It impacts our ability to create the art and to create an art practice that supports and sustains you. So we're going to talk all about that today. And today I have Leslie, Merrie, and Beverly from Growth Studio. And let's dive in. Let's just take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves. Start with you, Merrie. Go ahead and give us a little hello.
Hi there. My name's Merrie Kohlert. I live in the New York area, and I love everything painting, oil paint, gouache, acrylic. Right now, I'm really into doing nocturnal landscapes.
Leslie.
And I'm Leslie Cannon, and I am from Atlanta, Georgia, and I paint primarily in acrylics. I focus a lot on abstracts and landscapes and nudes and florals and whatever else comes to my mind to paint. And yeah, just a little bit of everything.
Beverly.
Hi, Antrice. So glad to be here. My name's Beverly Woodhall, and I live on the East Coast of North Carolina. My artwork is currently large and abstract with lots of layers underneath the oil painting that eventually is on top. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. So. Lots and lots of layers, lots of playfulness happening in there. Yep. So we're going to talk about the thing that is not supposed to go together, art and money. Oh my gosh, how taboo. Let's do it. I mean, it is and it isn't, right? So, you know what I want to start with is some of the assumptions that you've heard or you maybe have had yourself about money and about how that relates to art and money. Leslie, let's start with you.
That is an easy question for me to answer because I immediately go back to going off to college, knowing I wanted to do something with art. I knew from an early age I was an artist. It just was my identity. And my father was adamant that I did not major in art because you can't make money as an artist. And I was told that and heard that from other people as well. And that was, of course, many years ago before social media made it easier to sell art. So I became an art teacher and majored in both education and art so that I could support myself with my art and my practice and have worked hard, a lot of it coming through from you and Growth Studio to change those limiting beliefs that I have about money and scarcity and fear. And I wanted in on this talk because everything's changed for me about pricing my artwork from doing this work.
Wow. I love that. Okay. You know how I am. I just want to dig in right away.
Yeah.
This is Antrice restraining herself. Merrie, what about you? What are some of the thoughts and beliefs that you had or you heard about money and art?
I think a really obvious one is that people think that art is really fun, so it should be free. Because when you're making art, you're always having fun.
Always.
Right. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Which, oh my God, when you think about it, like if you're having fun, you shouldn't be paid. That's the underlying rule.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane. That's so funny. What about you, Beverly?
I too was an artist right out immediately. And I knew I was an artist, and that was that. I would make art constantly out of anything and everything I could. My parents, like Leslie, were not supportive at all. In fact, they, thought I was kind of crazy and would insult whatever I made. And it was painful, it was very painful. And my mom would say art is only for the rich. Rich people make art and rich people buy art. You'll never be able to do any of that. And college cannot be about art. Oh, God. And I had applied to an art school in high school, and I got into it, and they found out about it, and I was all excited, and they were like, "Ooh, no way." It was very much a fight to create. And I'm such a creative person. It was hard because it's me, They were always beating me up and making me feel like I was crazy. And then, of course, in school, being such an artist in school, people thought I was crazy and weird. So I kind of always had that on me, that you're so strange and different and weird, and in a negative way. And I have grown to learn that it's not a negative thing at all. That was a lifelong lesson. And then when it came to like selling my artwork and money, depends on the time in my life. Like I know when I was young, I would sell my artwork easily, to people, as classmates or whoever, neighbors, and then I guess skip forward to when I had finished raising my daughter, and I had to come up with, what do I do with myself now? Because I was a very hands-on parent. And I was just like, I just want to paint. I want to make paintings and art. And so we turned a backyard, a little building we have out there, into a little art studio. And I literally painted in private. I didn't even try to sell or show my art. I felt kind of embarrassed.
And that's because, growing up, that was the message that you got, that this wasn't a real career, and that wasn't the way it was
doing
going
something
to go.
wrong almost. Like that was.
Yeah.
Finally, with my husband's incredible support for our business, we ended up building an addition to our business and have, long story short, he's making furniture, and I got an art studio upstairs, a beautiful, huge, incredible, I designed an art studio of my dreams. And I felt like, well, I'm going to do this, and it's going to be real. And it's going to be like, I'm going to sell the art because I'm going to hang it downstairs in our little showroom. And I'm going to go around town and sell my art. So I thought, and it was difficult to go around town and sell my art. That didn't work out quite well yet. But selling the artwork in here, I have actually sold artwork and started selling artwork. And the pricing was always the most difficult aspect. I know that was a long answer, but it was a very difficult part to the story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, which makes sense, right? So, I mean, with all of our ideas around art, if the programming, for lack of a better term, that we have is this isn't going to work, or like you can't make a living out of that, or that's only for rich people and that's not you, right? And this sort of like idea of being forbidden to do it, then like all of those things are for sure going to impact how especially if we're not aware of it, they're going to impact the lens that we see everything through. And so obviously that's going to impact how we price our work, right? If the idea is that that's not, you can't make even something as simple as, but as you can't make a living out of selling paintings. Kind of underneath this is the idea that like, oh, well, then the paintings, like that must mean that the paintings are cheap or that they'll be hard to sell.
And you're not worthy.
And you're not, yeah.
And I used to hide and paint in my closet. I had a big closet. And actually we did have a lot of money. So that always struck me too. I don't know that we weren't like wealthy, but we were pretty good, well off. And so I didn't even know what that meant. It seemed like some kind of abstract people that,
Yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah.
You nodded your head when I said that, Leslie. What were you? And then Merrie, I'm going to come to you. What were you thinking?
I think because and y'all know this because we've talked about it so much, but I have struggled with, if my painting doesn't sell, then it's not good. And I put too much emphasis on the selling of my work rather than the creating it. And that is my struggle. And I know that just sitting here talking about it, a lot of it comes from, the beliefs that we heard, starving artist, or you can't do this. And let me just be clear, it wasn't just my dad that said that. It was a college professor and the general public. And just there weren't a lot of people in my orbit or my husband's orbit. He came from a very different socioeconomic background than I did, that valued buying original art. There were other things that were valued. So it's interesting to me as I grow my business and grow my following and my clientele, the things that I hear from both sides of the family, but also something that came up when I was telling my parents, because they are my biggest fans. I'll say that. They are at every show that they can get to. And my dad said to me one time, "I'm so proud of you for investing in yourself," talking about Grow Studio. That's something I never did. And I'm so proud of you for doing that. So the work that, it was a great conversation, and they're blown away. I tell them all the time, I'm getting this much for a piece of artwork. And I mean, they're just stunned. And so it's a wonderful full circle, and teaching generational patterns are changing, but I know that that's probably when I get too driven for the sale, for the price, or I place too much emphasis on how many paintings did I sell during a show. That's my success if I sold a lot of paintings. And so I have to work really hard to fight against, no, I made a lot of connections, or I shared a lot of things. I met new artists. We talk about that a lot too. It's not just the bottom line. So
yeah,
it's all tied up with that money.
It is. And what's really, I think, is really interesting about what you just said is that what you just described is the people around you had no reference point for an artist who is selling their work and who is making money off of their work. So they're going to fill in the blanks with their imagination of what's possible, which is in large parts that is reinforced by what they see around them or what they would do themselves. So when you sell a painting, and your parents are like, they're proud of you, of course, but they're also like, wow, I can't believe she sold a painting for that much. It's partly because they, in a way, they've just never seen that before. So they don't, if you don't, representation matters in this context too, that if you don't see an artist who's selling their work and who's making a living off of it, and you have no idea. And you're not a person who creates or buys art, then the filter that you're looking through is, well, I would never pay that, so nobody else would. And that's the unspoken assumption underneath it. And it's really hard to get out from under that. Merrie, you look like you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, you guys reminded me that, at those critical junctions in your life when you're either getting reinforced or, you're listening to naysayers, disenchant you from your dreams. I think one of the things that was very much a part of the time that I graduated art school was that the gallery system was extremely intimidating. So, I left school in Michigan and I moved to New York City, and the notion that you take your slides, which were slides like that, and you walk into a gallery, and there are these gorgeous people kind of scowling at you, and you're supposed to say, "Hi, here's my art. Don't you want to buy it?" It just was the most intimidating thing. So that was one one hard thing to overcome, but the world has changed, which is really great. And then another problem for me was grad school. It seemed like when I met people who were in this habit, like they were starting to show in galleries, it was like there was like a feeder between grad school and galleries. And at the time, I really was excited to make money and just go out there and see how I could sell my art. And I always like toyed with this idea of grad school. It always seemed like, well, if you go to grad school, then you will follow this formula because that will lead you to the gallery. And so, I definitely think that's something that a lot of people in growth studio have thought about or experienced.
Yeah. And this what's sort of implicit in that is the idea that there's a rule book, that there's a path that you are supposed to take, and also like in a way that means that that's how you succeed, which comes with its own limitations, right? Because if you do take that path, and your belief is that that's what is supposed to happen, is that if I go to grad school and I do this thing, then I'm going to get into a gallery, and you don't. Most people think the problem is them, that I did something or my art's not good enough when that's not the case. Right. So, I mean, like all of these things. And this is why I wanted, I love having these conversations, and why I wanted to bring you all on for this, and money in particular, is because if you're not even aware that that is the implication that you have bought into, then your only option is to feel bad that you didn't get it, which I think is so sad. I think it's so wrong and it's so sad. And I think it's probably, caused a lot of people to walk away from their art. And that's the part that really, for me, does honestly break my heart, because I do think we need more artists.
I think I can have a 2 cents in here. It's kind of like droves of people go to LA to be an actor, and most of them fail. And the reason they fail isn't because they're not a good actor, it's because they quit. And I think it's sort of similar. Life isn't easy. No one's going to give us anything. You got to get out there and fight for yourself. And if you don't get in a gallery or 10 galleries, you can just go home and say, I suck, I quit, or whatever. Or you just keep going and figure out other ways, or you just keep going. I was painting in private thinking it was almost like a crime or something for years of my life, but I never quit.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that, the only way I personally believe that we really fail is if we walk away from it, is if we just, if we let it get to us. So let's talk a little bit about pricing your work. Okay. Because we do talk about this a lot in Growth Studio. I will try not to teach I want to hear from you guys. Tell me, we'll start with Leslie. We'll just circle around. How do you price your work, and how have your thoughts about pricing your work changed?
Well, it would have been really helpful to have your spreadsheet about 5 years ago. And I loved your podcast that broke down all the different ways of pricing. Never really thought about how many ways you can come at it. And I realized I do a little bit of a couple of things. I start basically with size. I have a basic price based on, the inches of the work. I add to it if it's a commission. I add to it if I feel like going to be difficult and take me longer. So I throw in time. And then there's the emotional aspect that I have started honing in on more intuitively. And it goes to that question of, how am I going to feel when I'm painting this for my client and when they walk away with it? I don't ever want to feel resentful, because that means I did not price my work for what I feel like is my value. And I have learned that is just not how I want to feel. And the opposite end is that feeling of, oh, did I charge them too much? Which I rarely have, because I end up working more on my paintings than I just usually underestimate how long or how simply I can pull something off.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because it's hard for me to say, yes, it's good enough, Leslie, that is done. And I want it to be perfect, especially if it's a commission. So I have a lot of factors that I put into my prices, and I'm not a big factory of paintings. So I can take the time to do several sketches and work out my formula to where I feel really good about the price. And that being said, I've done it now enough to where if my client says that doesn't fit my budget, I'm okay with it. I'm past the part where I need to make every sale or that I need to make everyone happy. And the big lesson for me is I stay out of their wallet.
So what are some thoughts or beliefs that you adopted that got you to that place? Because for somebody listening, I can imagine that this is kind of like, okay, yep, got it. And then I got to this place where if they say that's too much, I'm okay with it. And I can imagine a lot of people listening to this are like, wait, oh my God, what? You how did you do that?
It's been a very intentional practice. My morning pages help of writing down my feelings about it. And there's a trust that if I'm using air quotes, lose that sale or that commission, there is another one that will come. Mm-hmm. I will be okay. I will have something else to paint. I have had enough paintings, commissions mostly, where I have been halfway through and resentful of the client and had feelings that were not good feelings to come out of my head onto my canvas because I changed my mind and changed my price to make it work. So I changed what I decided the value of my work was, and I lowered it, and it just doesn't work. And on the rare occasions where you have a client that ends up not being happy anyway, it's just a place I don't want to be. So I work hard to protect the value of my work and the feelings I have while I'm painting. And I want to be excited and energized by fulfilling my client's vision and their joyfulness when they get it. It's just, that's the best feeling. And I just want to protect that. So it was not overnight. It was something that I have intentionally worked on.
I love it. Yeah. And just knowing to intentionally work on it too, I think is really important, because it's like, when we're sitting in our studio painting and doing all these things, it's scary. And it's so hard, I think, to have any way to sort of gauge, like, is this okay? Can I ask for this much? And what does it mean? Like how do I gauge that when somebody says no to my painting? What are they actually saying no to, right?
Yes. And there's always, I just worked with a client recently, and she was very upfront at the beginning with her limited budget. And I love the connection with clients with commissions. And I knew that it was going to be a surprise gift for parents for Christmas. I mean, you say surprise gift to me and I am all in. I love it. And so we worked around several options, different substrates, a payment plan, and I was able to meet her budget and also protect my value of my painting. And I felt really good about it. And I know she's just overjoyed.
Yeah.
She's able to do this. So,
yeah. And I love that. Merrie, Beverly, I'm coming to you next, but I think that piece of it is so good for people to hear, because you have a client who's saying like, this isn't in my budget. And a lot of artists would just at that moment back down and be like, oh, okay, yeah. If they have that belief that my painting isn't worth it, right? But when you have the belief that my painting is worth it, then it's a totally different conversation, because then it's like, oh, okay, well, my painting is worth this money. So lowering the price is off the table, but what are our other options? And that changes everything. And that just kind of, again, illustrates that whatever it is that we believe about whatever mindset we have about pricing and about our value and our painting's value will impact the way that we behave when we're talking about our work, creating it, all of the things. Merrie, do you have some thoughts?
Leslie was saying that her methods for pricing her work, we've definitely talked about it here. In the beginning, I priced my work hourly, and I was doing some murals for restaurants, and it worked out. But something like a pitfall in that direction is that I find that people they'll look at a piece of art and they'll say, how long did it take you to make that? And then, then they quickly do the math. They're like, oh, it took 10 hours. And, that means you're making whatever, $400 an hour or something like that. But it's never really about the hours that it takes. It's about, there's so much behind every piece of artwork, so much experience. It's years. It's an accumulation of everything that you've learned. So it is so hard to put a price on it.
So what do you think about that now, Merrie, that this idea that it's hard to price my artwork? Because you're not doing murals now. You're doing,
Yeah. I think it's essential. Ultimately, I think when I was in a transition from teaching and then really focusing on technique, the final realization of a piece of art is that it gets sold. So it's so critical that I have put my head in the sand and just wanted to work on my technique and just get into the what I would consider the more fun side. But more and more, I realize the other side is so essential. It's ultimately sharing the work and finding it a home, a happy home where someone might love it. And,
and why do you say that's essential for you?
It's almost hard to articulate. It feels like, why would you want to hide something special? Something that you worked hard on, things that are beautiful are worth sharing. And I think, you'll hear about like a poet who doesn't share their work. And, I want to hear that poetry, or a musician that doesn't sing their music in public. Like, I want to hear that music. That's the soup of life.
Yeah. Beverly, you look like you have something to say. Like, I love it.
Yeah. I was just thinking about it for me, because for so long I didn't show my work or sell my work. I just kept piling it up. And, now that I've been selling my work, I feel like when you make a painting and, I think someone spoke about it being fun. And yes, art making is fun, but it is also work, and it's also serious work and knowledge. And you're creating almost a life of its own. You're making something new that came from you. And to not pass it on and let it live its life on someone's walls is kind of sad. And that's why I think pricing, it can be flexible for me.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean?
I don't do anything I'm not like Leslie at all in pricing. I wouldn't even know how to do what she does. Like, when I finish a painting, I just feel like before you gave us that chart, I would just give it a price based on, well, it's a certain size. And, I just sort of thought the price would be sort of in a range based on other artwork that I've seen that I think is at my level. And that's what I really would go on. It was more of like a gut feeling. And the problem with that was there's no consistency. So I've started to price my work based on your chart. And it's very much, I feel very relaxed now because I was always, my assistant would say, okay, when it was all said and done, what's the price? And I just like freeze and be like, I don't know, whatever. I don't know. Like, and so it was always very, very difficult. And now I feel really good about the price per inch. And then if it's framed, I add the framing charge. And if it's, that's what I'm doing now.
And what do and I'd love to hear from all of you on this, because there's pricing the work, right? There's picking the number, which it has its own head drama to it, right? Of like, can I do this? And what are other people charging? And am I allowed to do this? And like, where's the, that internal almost belief that there's this rule book, this price police that's going to come after you. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be done. And on page 8,472, we have Leslie Cannon's prices. And and this is what she deviated, right? They're coming down.
I think this portion of money that we're talking about right now, this subject, is something that I got from all the different things that have been said and talked about in Growth Studio. Just all the things about, it could be not even be about money, just about trusting yourself, or all the things that make you feel valuable. And for the longest time, I didn't think I'd ever be able to price my work correctly, where people would come in, love it, buy it, and feel good about the price. I would feel good about the price. Like, I didn't think that would ever happen for me. I really didn't. And it is so recent that I've gotten comfortable with my pricing.
What do you think made the difference for you? How did you get comfortable with your pricing?
It wasn't one thing. It was, like I said, a culmination of all the different things we've talked about for the past 2 years that I've been involved in Growth Studio. It all was like churning around in there, in that subconscious. And then, of course, the charts certainly helped. But I was like, well, what numbers from the chart? How do you know what number to pick? It's a great chart, but what number do I pick?
Yeah.
And I picked one, and so far so good.
I love it. Leslie.
I remember specifically the Zoom call we had, and you told a story about pricing a commission and sending the bid to the client, and it was a big number. And it was literally the biggest number I had ever heard for somebody I knew that got from a painting. And the client took a minute, and you said you thought, oh, here it comes. And their answer was, are you sure this is enough?
Yeah.
And I feel like that broke my own little glass ceiling, because I thought, is it really possible? Am I that good? And then I'm like, it's not about you being good, and it took me, it was probably a year, but I hit that number on my mural. It stayed with me. And I said, I will get that number one day. I will build.
Oh my God. I didn't know that was, I love it.
Yes. I had that number to break. And that goes back to if we don't have a reference point, then how do we know? It is a very solitary business. You don't start out, a lot of us, it'd be great to be an intern with a famous artist and see how they do everything. But I didn't have that. I don't have a boss. I didn't train. It was like, I'm an artist. Here I am.
Yeah.
Poof. And so, not knowing how to price things, or what can you get other than going to galleries and looking at Instagram and seeing what other artists are selling, it just was really eye-opening for me. And it's one of those little, those little thoughts that stay with you. And you're like, I'm going to try.
Now I know. Yeah. Now I know that that's a possibility.
Possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about, what do we mean when we talk about the value of a painting? Because you all know, you've heard me talk about this enough. So I want to hear your, how you've kind of like internalized that and what your thoughts are on that. You want to start, Merrie?
Yeah. I mean, I think the value of a painting, there's like an indirect quotient to how much you value it yourself. And I think that's something I really learned in growth studio, is that whole, you got to have your own back. And if you don't love your art, how are you going to sell it? If you're not able to articulate what it is you love about it. And sometimes you need to help a collector along, or someone who's kind of interested, explain to them what's special about it. And it might work or it might not work. The ways that you can sabotage yourself by assuming that your collector can't afford to buy your art, or making assumptions about what people want or don't want, and maybe even underselling your art. So I think, having that sense of your own value, really, really like trickles out into the marketplace.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's so crucial. I mean, if you really think about that, it's like if you're a chef and you have a restaurant and you don't like the way that your food tastes, right? Like you can't, how does that even work? Our special today is this really gross pasta, and I'm really sorry. The tomatoes aren't chopped right. Right? Doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to love your work. And that, I think, is another block in the pricing and in the whole conversation about money, is getting over that piece of it too, that it's okay for you to love your own work. It doesn't make you arrogant. It doesn't make you a bad person. You are allowed and encouraged to absolutely fall in love with your work, because if you can't do that, there's no possible way for you to describe to somebody else why they should buy your painting. And the second that they like make a micro expression on their face, if you don't love your work, you will interpret that as they don't either, when maybe their nose just itches.
It's when we get down to the Antrice therapy part of our calls, because it feels a lot like being able to have self-love. You have to be able to love your artwork and love the creator and the gift that the artist has. And you have to be able to have enough. It's hard to have the self-confidence and the self-esteem to say, I painted this and this is how much it cost, period. Do
you want to buy it?
Do you want to buy it? And not saying, this is my, what was the example you used one time? This is my gallon of milk. It's okay. Do you want it? And you said, do you want to buy this gallon of milk? No. What's wrong with it?
Exactly. Like, is it past its expiration date? Why are you talking about it like that? Right? You need to tell me that's the freshest gallon of milk that could ever be, and how wonderful it tastes, and how much you love that gallon of milk, because otherwise I'm suspicious.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's so funny. And I love phrasing it. Like, I love coming up with these ways of expressing it so you can really see it, because it is funny, what we do and how we talk about our work and how we talk about the price, even the pricing of it. Like, oh my God, now I'm in Argentina.
Go to the Rolling Stones ticket concert. That one still is my best go-to when I'm struggling. If you buy a ticket to see the Rolling Stones, you save up your money. You want to hear and see Mick Jagger doing Mick Jagger. And he would never call you up before the show and go, hey, would you like it if I sang it slower? Or would you like it if I did it this way? No, he's the expert. He's who I'm paying to go see. So when I'm painting and somebody has chosen me and used their hard-earned money for me to paint, I need to be Mick Jagger.
Yes.
I need to do what they're paying me to do.
Yeah. 100%. Beverly, you have a thought.
I would not answer that with a number at all. But for me, the value of my work. It's very complex because, first of all, I put a lot of energy and myself into the work. I put a lot of thought. I put a lot of time, staring at it, thinking about it, dreaming about it, building it, changing it, redoing it, and finding where it ultimately lands. And you can't say, okay, you get $10 an hour for that painting. It doesn't work that way in my brain at all. And I think the value of my work has changed because the beginning, I didn't value my work at all. And now when I look back, I have a lot of compassion for me, the person I was and the work that I did. And I'm like, wow, it isn't so horrible at all. You were experimenting and learning and doing the best you could on your own. And it has led you to some really good decisions like joining Growth Studio. And then there's lots of complicated things that we learn in Growth Studio. And you just hit us, it's like you just know what to tell us and talk about that. It's incredible. You just guide us so well. Like you just know. And it's a very comfortable safe place to really go into the meat of the subject of art and our art and just art in general. And so when then it comes time to putting a price on it, I finally become much more confident in that, but that did not come easy. And I don't think the work I'm making now had the same value as the stuff I made toward the beginning, because I've got more to add to it now that I've learned and mastered. I've learned and mastered many more art techniques and ideas now. So the value does go up. And I'm much more comfortable now. I could never talk about my work very well. I'd stumble and didn't even know what I could even say. And now I can really speak to it. It'll flow right out off my tongue. And if someone were to say that price is too high, why would you want some, or, challenge you about the price? I think for me, they don't get the painting. They don't understand it. It's not worth it to them. And I can certainly try to talk about it and try to convince them to buy it. But I'm not really here to do that. So.
Such a good answer. And I'd love to hear all your thoughts on what do you think the value is to the collector?
Yeah.
Why do people buy art?
I'm a collector and I buy art. I hope I can go first this time. I buy art when I travel. I always pick up a piece of artwork, of original artwork. It can be really tiny or it can be large. It can be anything. And so my home is filled with things that I've picked up on my travels, and I don't buy T-shirts and stuff. I buy art. And the reason I buy art is because I want to support a local artist and I want to remember my trip. And every time I see the art, it just makes my heart feel good that I did support like a local artist. And I don't usually buy the popular artists' artwork, It's usually I find a little bit of a more unusual artist,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's why I buy art. And sometimes I buy art in a show right here in my town because it speaks to me and I want to look at it a lot. And I think it's something I won't get tired of and bored. It's a beautiful thing to have in your home. Some people probably buy art because of the artist and they are like, want to copycat all the other people buying the art because, oh, you should have this art, and that's fine for them. I think a lot of people aren't in touch with art. They don't even, it's not really in their vocabulary. And when they have art on the wall, it's not really that meaningful. So to find someone who does want your art and it is meaningful is what you really are looking for, I think.
I did the same thing just a couple of years ago. I bought myself my first big piece of art, and I'm still just so proud of it. And I did meet the artist, and so it was good for me to be on the other side of it. And my hope is that when someone buys a piece of my art, it's because it made a connection. It spoke to them. It either evoked a memory of a place or a time or, a meal they ate, or, that it touched them so that every time they walk past it, it makes them happy. It's that simple for me. If somebody buys it because it matches their couch, okay, great.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping, my biggest hope is that it always brings them joy, bottom line.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I like to think about when we're talking about pricing, and when you are saying, here's this painting I did, here's the price, would you like to buy it? The thing that you're thinking about is them walking into their home and feeling that joy and feeling that, just seeing that beauty, or, the painting, even, I know this is sacrilegious for artists, but I mean, some people do buy paintings because it matches the decor of that room. And that doesn't have to be an insult.
No, it makes them very happy. They found the thing that completed the room.
Yeah. And, I think some of that insult comes from the belief, again, we're like all these beliefs, right? So this belief that if somebody buys the art to complete that room, then they can only paint paintings that match couches. Like there's this weird kind of like line that gets these two dots that are not connected, then become connected. And it becomes a thing that is like, this is how I have to paint now. And that's not the case, right? I mean, maybe there are some artists who are like, yeah, I paint this color because that's the color trend of the year. Great. I don't think there's anybody in Grow Studio so far that we've had that does that. But, if that's your thing, that's your thing. But if what you're doing with that work is when somebody buys that piece and it matches the couch or whatever, what they're walking into the room, and they are walking into a room that is beautiful and it's their aesthetic, and that makes them happy. And so the painting is a part of, I'm designing my home to be this place of relaxation and joy. Like there's a whole chaos out happening in the world. And when I come home, this is my sanctuary. And that painting, when I look at it, creates this experience for me. And that's part of how I relax. That's part of what makes this a beautiful space for me. So if we're thinking about that, when we're talking about our work and that experience, and what is the value of having a place that you come home to and you're just like, oh my gosh, like everything in this room is like beautiful and it's me, and they get to experience that every single day. That's what I want you thinking about when you're pricing and value, like when you're saying your price. And that is part of that conversation of stay out of their pockets, stay out of their wallets. Presumably 99% of the time, we are talking to another adult who is fully capable of making their own choices about how they spend their money. And that's like that. Here we go. And Teresa's on her soapbox. I feel so strongly about this, but because if you get out of the headspace that a lot of artists typically are in, which is, I've not seen the manual of the pricing, and I don't know if I'm allowed to charge this. And also I know that I made this like 1/4 of an inch error on that painting and that kills me. And so now I've got to discount it 50% because it's not my best work. And I'm so sorry I'm even asking you if you want to buy this painting, right? Like we kind of like spin into these like places, and I will now get off my soapbox.
I think one of the things you were talking about, Antrice, brought up something for me. Like some artists paint decorative and they paint sort of their own work kind of deal where, and if they need to make more money. And I wondered your thoughts about that. Was that clear? Some people paint like decorative things that they know are going to sell.
Yeah.
And then they also paint the stuff that's really coming out of their soul. And it doesn't sell quite as much as that. They just can't sell those pieces as frequently as they can sell these more simple decorative pieces of art.
Like there's such a spectrum on that question. And yeah, let's dive in, right? So there's a spectrum. Like sometimes the way we describe it is like, okay, this is my real work. And then I create this other stuff that's fake and it's not me, right? Like that, there's a huge spectrum in there. We may have a series of paintings like, and this is something that artists, it's something that can be challenging. I think if you're not in a good headspace about it, like if you think about it, there's the art that there's a number of paintings that might be in a gallery. And then let's say that you go into the exploratory phase of your art, right? So you're in your studio and you're playing and you're like doing all this stuff and you're in that phase where I don't know where this is going to go. And I'm just playing with the materials, or I'm suddenly going to be just like really obsessed with, painting this particular motif. And I'm going to just like play and play and play and see where that takes me. Am I selling myself out if I continue to sell my work that I know the gallery wants, that the gallery has sold before, that when I created that work, I created it in good faith, meaning like that was something that I'm genuinely interested in. So that's like one spectrum, right? Of like, hey, here's this work that, the gallery loves it because every time I paint these paintings, I'm going to totally make this up, but like every time I paint the paintings of Yosemite, everybody buys them. But I loved painting those those paintings of Yosemite are genuine. And now I know that those are selling. So I go back to Yosemite and I create some more paintings. Like my point of view on that, I have got a couple things, and some people might scream at the whatever it is that they're listening to this on. But, like there's one thing is that situation where our artwork, I believe, is always evolving and it should always be evolving. So there is going to be a quantity of work that is out there, meaning like it's outside of what you normally show, let's say in a gallery, because you're continuing to push yourself and play and discover things about your work. That's hopefully always, I really do hope that that's always true, that you always have this body of work that's just in your mind a little bit crazy because you're playing. And then let's say like there is a person who's doing work that like, okay, I'm going to paint these pink houses. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to paint these pink houses because they always sell, and I'm painting them because they sell, right? Now, like a lot of people will point their finger and be like, oh, sell out. You're a terrible artist. If you're doing the work that matters to you in your studio and you have to feed yourself and your family and you have to buy paint and you have to pay rent, and the way that you do that is to paint pink houses, in my opinion, go for it.
Oh,
go
yeah.
for it. Do it, because you need to support yourself. Like, why fall on a sword and, like of an ideology, right? That's made up. Like,
Right.
Who are you trying to impress? The internet trolls, right? Like, who's going to come after you? And does their opinion really matter to you? Like I see people come after artists online and I'm just like, what are you even doing with your life? I have opinions. I'm sorry. But like that, like people coming at artists and telling them how they should or shouldn't like live their lives and run their studios and how they should or shouldn't feed themselves and their family. I'm just like, no. This is where like I turn my mama bear comes in and I just want to, you guys have seen that where I'm just like, shut that down. Sorry, a little off topic.
I actually think it's very on topic and going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, which is like, how do you make a living as an artist, right? Which is essentially what it is. And, every time you're able to make money with your art, you buy yourself time in the studio. So it's a very important cycle. And
yes.
I'm with you, Antrice. Everyone's got to do themselves. You do you, get it done.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many artists like that did things to listen to me. Like this sounds so obvious. There's so many artists that did things to support themselves, but like there are plenty of, and this drives me crazy, but I'll use it only because I know that people understand what I'm saying. Like artists with a capital A that supported themselves by making decorative art, meaning making, painting flowers on plates or whatever it is, or doing posters or doing illustrations, or like, I mean, go back to like technically more blasphemy from Antrice, like Michelangelo, like that was paid for.
Right.
Did that for money. Right. So you need to eat. You're no good to anybody if you're not fed and you're not resourced. And I am not kidding when I say this. The world needs your art. And you need to make sure that you can continue to create it in whatever way that you can. I feel like now you guys are used to this. I yell at you guys, like I get on and I start yelling at you guys, and now I'm yelling at the podcast. Like,
yay.
Okay.
This is a good place to say, join Growth Studio now.
You want Antrice to yell at you? Join Growth Studio.
That might be a whole nother podcast.
Or do you want a mama bear?
Yeah. Again, that might be the wrong demographic.
I have opinions, and they're almost always protect the artist at all costs. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Okay. This question I think is really good. What thoughts do you now notice around money or pricing that you were oblivious to before? Who wants to start?
Well, I'll say I was oblivious to the fact that using that chart could really make pricing feel easier, consistent, so I there's that for sure. And yeah, we'll just leave that for there right now.
Perfect.
Was not aware of how much I was changing my prices to fit the show or the group or the situation. Like the people pleaser in me would, before I got, like the system, or before I was real intentional in writing every one of my prices down and noticing, I would just kind of I would get right inside my clients' wallets and come up with my own prices. It's been a while, but when you asked that question, I was like, wow, I would really try to, it was like chasing the sale again. I would try to fit the prices to please everybody so that I would sell a lot, so I would feel good about my artwork. If I sold a lot, then I was good.
Yeah. And also the underlying belief there is that people buy art because of the price, and they don't.
No.
They don't at all.
That's right.
That's another lesson.
Yes, that's a big one.
Huge.
Okay. And then how's being in Growth Studio helped you with your thoughts around money and pricing?
A ton. It's everything. Absolutely everything. That we're worthy, that there's a way to price your art, that you shouldn't pay attention to what you think that someone can afford or wants to pay, and you got to know your own value. And I mean, there's loads of things that we've discussed today, but yeah, I would say I've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, around money. I'm very comfortable with it now, which is something I thought would never, ever happen.
Oh my God, I love that. How about you, Leslie?
What you just brought up, that if I didn't sell a piece of artwork, it isn't because I didn't price it right. All of the things that Beverly said, the value, the having your own back, all of it works towards us as artists being able to believe in ourselves and believe the value of our work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's having a group to say these things out loud is so valuable in itself. And to be able to, you make us say, all right, what do you charge for that size of, painting? And that it can get so uncomfortable, but yet it's so supportive at the same time. And you can, you only grow when you get to the uncomfortable bits and parts of it. And just, I don't know, it's also courage. It's courage to say, I'm going to try this. I'm going to work on my pricing.
Be really intentional about it. It's so good.
It's funny how I feel like with Growth Studio and Antrice, like I know that I've come to the calls in all sorts of different states of mind and with different parts of my art. And I always feel like you're so gentle and it doesn't matter how we present. You're not judging us. You're not making us feel like in any way less than or wrong or, a shame, any of those things. And you act like that's not maybe a big deal, but that's a very big deal, so.
Oh, thank you. I genuinely see all of you as just full on rock stars. Like that's what I see when I come on the calls. Merrie, how about you? Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes. Well, rock stars need fans. So it's nice to feel like there's a fan out there. So, yeah, I think every time we talk about money and it comes up a lot, I would have this like gut punch, like, oh, we're going to talk about money because it is so loaded. And it makes you feel vulnerable when you're selling your work and what's your value. And I think what I've learned is that I'm more than my art and that it's not personal. Like if someone doesn't want my art, that's okay. Pick yourself up and go show it to the next person. And that's sort of like just even being able to identify that's the thing that made my stomach go, is such a huge help because if you don't know what scares you, then you don't know how to approach it to even try to make it go or, attack it.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Yeah. So good. All right. Anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think the good thing about it is it's not like we talk about it in a difficult way. It's brought up sometimes as a topic, but it always sort of has tentacles and leading us to other meanings and contributors to the money talk. And, like I said, I think Growth Studio, a lot of things are said and taught and told in a lot of different ways, and we absorb them over and over again and from any angle. So it's not just, okay, we're going to have a money talk today. And, it doesn't work like that in Growth Studio at all. So.
Awesome. Leslie, what were you going to say?
When I wrote a couple of things down, this was a shout out again to Beverly and her play, because one of your questions was, what are some sneaky ways that your thoughts about money can come into your practice? And occasionally I feel it when I'm trying to be in the exploratory stage. I'm like, oh, I'm wasting paper. I'm wasting paint. And I'm all like, nope, Beverly tells me to play because she's the best playground friend that I have. That I feel that a lot. It's my, don't be wasteful. Everything needs to be going towards.
Leslie, but it is, and you're not being wasteful, and it is going towards producing better And I encourage you to keep doing it and don't
She
stop.
just keeps telling me that, and I'm working on it.
Because it's going to take you places and you're going to be like, oh, wow, we should have done this sooner. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, I believe in it strongly.
Well, you're very good at it.
And another thing about Growth Studio is that we love to cheer each other on. Each of your successes feel like success to me. And to watch the arc of growth, the people who feel like tribe to me it brings you so much like transitive excitement.
Agree 100%.
Yeah. And it's really nice when someone new comes in too and you get a fresh flavor and we kind of group grows and I really like that too.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Leslie Cannon, Merrie Collard, and Beverly Woodhall. If you're curious, you should definitely go see examples of their work in the show notes of this episode. Now, if you've been listening to this whole series, you have a good sense of the wide range of topics that we cover inside Growth Studio. The thing I love about Growth Studio is that it really is a lot of fun, and we don't shy away from the tough topics that will help you grow yourself and your art practice. These things come up, and fortunately, I have this very unique blend of coaching expertise, business expertise, and painting expertise. I don't know. I'm just one of those people that when I'm curious about something, I will go all in. So that's kind of how I ended up with this giant collection of coaching certificates to prove, if anyone has any doubt, just how much of a nerd I am. But lucky for you, that all works in your favor. So whether you're ready to join Growth Studio or not, I will continue to share freely what I know here on the podcast. And when you work with me, you get even more. Plus, you get to hang out with amazing artists like Leslie, Merrie, and Beverly, and everyone else that you've been meeting these past few episodes. Okay, so if you're ready to join us, the link is in the show notes, or you can go to savvypainter.com/join. Either way, I will continue to support and cheer you on. Okay, that's what I have for you this week. I will see you next week here on the podcast. Talk soon. Hey, if you want to take what you are learning here on the Savvy Painter podcast even further, join us in Growth Studio. This is where you will take what you've learned here on the podcast and apply it, practice it, and take these concepts from just good ideas that maybe you'll do someday to habits that become part of your practice. Growth Studio is a unique community of artists we meet multiple times a week for live coaching, critiques, and demos. Just go to savvypainter.com/join.